I'm Peggy Kvam, a member of the League of Women Voters of Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, Hopkins, and your moderator for the Hennepin County Commissioner District 6 Candidate Forum. I would like to welcome our candidates and our viewers on behalf of our hosts, the League of Women Voters chapters of South Tonka, Edina, Wayzata, Plymouth, and Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, Hopkins. The League of Women Voters, a volunteer nonpartisan political organization, encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. It is our purpose in sponsoring meetings such as this to provide you with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss issues that are important to you. There is never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time and setting such as this. If your questions were not addressed, feel free to contact the candidates directly. Tonight's questions have been submitted online in advance. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Those that fall in the same general area may be consolidated. Questions become the property of LWV. The primary election for Hennepin County Commissioner District 6 will take place on Tuesday, August 11th, with absentee voting starting on June 26th. The two candidates with the most votes will advance to the ballot for the November 3rd general election. There is no party designation for this office. I will now introduce the candidates for the Hennepin County Commissioner District 6 primary election. Brad Aho,
Hi.
Dario Anselmo, Carmel Adobe, Chris Latondras, Sheri Sutit, and Kimberly Wilburn. This 90-minute candidate forum will begin with 2-minute opening statements. Following that, the candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the first question, which they received in advance. For the rest of the forum, candidates will be limited to a 1-minute response. Every candidate will be called on to answer every question and in a randomized order. Our candidate forum will wrap up with 1-minute closing statements from each candidate. So we will now start with the opening statements with Brad Aho. Brad?
Well, thank you, Peggy, and good evening. Thank you to all the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum and to the other candidates for participating. I'm Brad Aho, and I'm running for Hennepin County Commissioner to work for you. Why should you care who the next county commissioner is? Local government has the biggest impact on our daily lives as it provides core services such as public safety, emergency, health and medical services, transportation infrastructure, parks and libraries, to name a few. Hennepin County is Minnesota's largest county with a budget of $2.5 billion and over 9,100 employees. District 6 is the #1 contributor to the county's property tax revenue. We need strong leadership to guide our county through some very challenging issues facing our community and respond in a fiscal responsible manner to ensure that we are getting a good value for our tax contribution. I am the only candidate with local government experience, having served on the Eden Prairie City Council for the last 16 years. I will bring my strong leadership, business experience, and local government background to the county board to focus on keeping Hennepin County a premier place to live and run a business. It is critical to deliver the core services necessary without overburdening families and businesses with taxes. We must ensure that services are provided in an efficient, cost-effective manner and avoid overlapping with state and local services. We can use technology to improve efficiency and delivery of services while reducing costs. I am passionate about local government and was recently honored as the best of the best city council member in the Southwest metro area, due in large part to my inclusive team approach to problem solving. By working effectively with federal, state, and local leaders and residents, I have been able to help enhance Eden Prairie Superior City services while keeping taxes low. That combination has earned us the ranking of #1 city in the nation to live. I am ready to bring that experience and leadership to the county board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Dario Anselmo.
Hello, well, thank you, League of Women Voters, for hosting this forum. My name is Dario Anselmo. I'm a candidate for Hennepin County Commissioner. and I'm looking forward to talking to you all about the issues that are out here in front of us today. My background is important to me, and as well as the issues that we're going through. The county commissioners deal with a lot of very important issues like the environment, public safety, transportation, social services, public health, and the libraries, just to name a few. Fortunately, my 30-year career as an entrepreneur, a business owner, a civic and nonprofit leader, as well as a former Minnesota state representative, have given me the necessary experiences, a track record of accomplishments to successfully serve as your next commissioner. A little background about me: I was born in Duluth, raised in Orono, and have been a resident of Hennepin County for nearly 50 years. My wife Jeannie and I have 3 children and have lived in Edina for 20 years. I started my first business, a tech startup, at age 21 in Edina. After selling it, I bought the Fine Line Music Cafe in downtown Minneapolis, which I operated for 20 years. That's the place where I first experienced the need for Hennepin County services. I've also been in the commercial real estate for 28 years too, and spent a lot of time downtown. For 25 years, I've worked to support mental health services, serving as the president of the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, as well as being on the board of Mental Health Minnesota, the state's oldest mental health organization. As a state representative in Edina, I worked on infrastructure investments for roads and bridges, increased K-12 funding in education, and reduced teen smoking, and also worked on funding and finding ways to prevent teen suicide. As a member of the K-12 Education Committee, I worked on forming a budget of over $12 billion. My top priorities would be mental health, which is something our community has been affected by deeply these past few months, and I would say the past few years. Making sure Hennepin County is delivering on this Hennepin Health services, and in finding ways to improve the delivery will be one of my top goals. Public safety, making sure Hennepin County residents feel safe and have equal access to our justice system is important. As a county commissioner, I will support the sheriff's office and make sure our jails and our courts have the resources they need to do their work efficiently and fairly. Property taxes are also a priority for me. We've seen assessments that have gone up way too high over the last years. There's a number of other issues that will be on my website. I encourage you to go there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have candidate Carmel Adobe.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for watching this recorded forum. I am Carmel Adobe. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this nonpartisan forum, and a thank you to those who took time to submit your questions. As I stated, I am Carmel Adobe, and I'm running for commissioner to give a voice to the undiscussed challenges being faced in our community. As commissioner of District 6, I believe I can bring a different perspective and also be able to lead the board into a progressive, united, and hopeful future all the way around. As a child, things weren't easy for me and my siblings, to say the least. We lacked material esteem, but there was no need for love, and there was a lot of talent in our home. In the 2nd grade, I scored above average on a statewide test and was accepted into a school for gifted students in St. Paul. The challenges I faced at home did eliminate that opportunity. As a teen, I went to multiple high schools as a foster care child. I attended Woodbury, Stillwater, Tartan, and eventually graduated from a school in St. Paul called the High School for Recording Arts. I'm not your typical politician. The life lessons that have shaped me and created my passion for this change didn't come from a book, and I certainly didn't pay for or enroll in a class for a disadvantaged childhood. But nonetheless, I have what it takes to lead District 6 into a new lens of hope, humanity, and humility that will create long-lasting effects for all children in our community. I believe that we need to look at things like human services, the MFID program, and becoming more independent after using government assistance. Thank you for this time to share a little bit of information about myself tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Chris Latondras.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and for all of you tuning in tonight from Edina to Hopkins, Minnetonka to Mound, and everywhere in between. Besides the day my wife, Ashley, a nurse practitioner at Hennepin Healthcare, said I do, and the birth of our 2 boys, the 2 greatest honors in my life have been serving in the Obama administration as a part of the president's team at USAID, which is a $50 billion a year federal agency, and the day that I was elected to the Hopkins School Board to serve the community that raised me, alongside Fartun Ahmed, the first Somali American woman elected to a school board anywhere in the country. What ties these two moments together is not only that common thread of my career that's been entirely devoted to public service. They underscore my simple faith in the promise that government can make people's lives better, and that when we come together as good neighbors and good citizens, we really can do anything. But that promise is being tested today. From a pandemic that's taken lives, shaken our economy, and shown just how important, but also how fragile our local governments are, to the events set in motion by the killing of George Floyd right here in Hennepin County that shows just how much more work we have to do before that promise of equal justice rings true for all. It's almost like these days have seen a veil ripped back. There's really so much riding on this moment and how we respond and the kind of leadership we elect at all levels of government, including filling Jan Callison's very important big shoes on the Hennepin County Board. So I'm grateful for everyone who's decided to step up and run for this office, especially at a time like this. So thank you. But here's what I know. If you want to elect someone with experience working at all levels of government, with a proven track record of bringing people together to get things done, with skills that can only come from crisis management inside local government. I'm the other candidate here with local government experience. Inside local government during a global pandemic, remotely educating and feeding 6,000 students, and someone who won't leave you playing guessing games about their values and priorities. Then I'm asking for your vote to serve as your next Hennepin County Commissioner for District 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we'll hear from Sheri Sutit.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and for the people listening at home. My name is Sheri Sutit, and I have deep roots in our community. I grew up in Edina, where I graduated from Edina West High School. I graduated from the University of Minnesota and William Mitchell College of Law. I've lived in Minnetonka for the past 35 years with my husband, Michael, who's a Minnetonka dentist. I'm a proud mother and a proud grandmother. I've spent my entire career in public service, working for over 30 years as an attorney in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I specialize in Title VII employment discrimination. As part of my job, I have provided legal advice, training, and representation to every department throughout Hennepin County. I helped create the Hennepin County Non-Discrimination Respectful Workplace Policy that insists that the workplace be free from discrimination, harassment, including sexual and racial harassment, and workplace bullying. My extensive knowledge of Hennepin County and my deep roots in the community make me uniquely qualified for this position, and I think sets me apart from the other candidates. I believe experience and knowledge matter. When elected, I will be a common sense, moderate voice who will insist that tax dollars are spent wisely. As a litigator, I will be a strong advocate for my community. This is a nonpartisan position, and I'm the only candidate in the race that has not affiliated with a political party. I will listen to all voices in my community. Issues that are of particular importance to me are safety in our homes and our community, a fair and equitable justice system, and preserving and protecting our community's precious natural resources. For more details on these issues, I hope you can visit my website at sherisutit.com. Thank you.
Our last candidate for the opening statement is Kimberly Wilburn.
Hi, I want to echo the other candidates in thanking the League of Women Voters and everyone who is watching. My name is Kimberly Wilburn. I am a mother, a wife, a veterinarian, a scientist, a community activist and organizer, and a community member. The world has changed since I declared my candidacy back in December, but the issues that have been brought to light by the pandemic and by the murder of George Floyd are not new. People have been crying out for decades, for longer, and their voices have largely gone unheard. We can no longer accept the status quo. It is literally killing people. Right now, there is focus on criminal justice and policing, but what happens after the officers' trials have finished? What happens many, many months from now when the COVID pandemic is over and we return to our normal lives? History has shown us that returning to normal means returning to ignoring the voices of the poor, Black, Brown, Indigenous, LGBTQ, and disabled people. For me, that is not an option. I originally decided to run because I know we can do a better job at reaching the marginalized and traditionally underserved, and because there are not enough faces and voices like mine at the table, and because for far too long, I have watched candidates make promises and then forget them and forget me and all of you once they are elected. And then a few weeks ago, I witnessed not just a murder. I saw an officer sworn to uphold the law kneel on a man's neck as though his life had no value, fully expecting no consequences. And if that is not a reason why more voices like mine are needed, I don't know what is. There are issues that all of us face: the environment, housing, criminal justice, transportation and infrastructure. We need a leader who will face the issues that we are all faced with an equity lens. We need me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that wraps up our opening statement, so we will go right into our first question. This is an advanced question, so you have 2 minutes to respond. And the first person who will answer is Kimberly Wilburn. What will the county commissioners do during your tenure to address social justice and equity and equality?
So there are many specific things that I would like to see happen, such as abolishing library fines, free broadband, working with the Sheriff's Department and other agencies to take an in-depth look at our policing and incarceration policies, working with state and local government and other agencies to provide housing for all stages of life, continuing the efforts of the Disparity Reduction Program, and following recommendations from the NAACP Twin Cities Economic Inclusion Plan. But a significant change that I would like to see the board make is to have more community input. Back in May, the city staff brought forth proposals for sites that they were planning to stop leases with as part of their consolidation plan. And Commissioner Conley pointed out that several of those sites had programs that were run by and served predominantly African American and indigenous populations, and that by stopping the leasing, we would be endangering those programs, and it would run counter to the mission on equity of the county. And my question is, what if Commissioner Conley hadn't been aware of those programs and who they served? We can't solve equity issues that we don't know exist. So we need input from community members. So I am recommending that we form a panel that has community members, including people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ, elderly, disabled people, to give input on proposed county action, so that we have input from these communities, and we get a more equitable response. So it's time to start governing with more inclusion.
Thank you. Chris Latondras, what will the county commissioners do during your tenure to address social justice and equity and equality?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll start by saying this. I believe that Black lives matter. George Floyd's life mattered. And as leaders in Minnesota, where we see some of the worst racial disparities in the nation on issues like healthcare, education, housing, and criminal justice, we simply can't continue business as usual without looking in the mirror and moving in a different direction. And I think it really comes down to whether or not we're delivering on that basic American promise of equal justice for all. And as a nation, I think what we're seeing is, in the response to this moment, is a long overdue reckoning with our failure to deliver on that promise. And this may be the defining issue facing Hennepin County government in the decade again. As our state's largest local government, $2.5 billion per year, our county touches the lives of 1 in 5 Minnesotans, including a huge footprint in human services, healthcare, and yes, in our criminal justice system, It's one of the largest line items in our budget. And as a public servant, one of my foundational principles is this idea that budgets are moral documents. I'll say that again, a budget is a moral document. And more than the words that we say, our budgets are a promise to our community about the issues and the people that we value. And for example, as a school board member, I just think there's this huge disconnect that as a state, we spend around $6,500 per student in our public schools, while our county spends nearly the same amount, $5,000 for each person in our correction system. There may be reasons for this, but these reasons are rooted in basic assumptions and ways of doing business that we're going to have to take a long, hard look at leaders and ask if these are really a reflection of our values, not to mention a good use of taxpayer dollars, fiscal responsibility. And I believe that with the right leadership in place, we have an opportunity to affect change at an unimaginable scale of Hennepin County government. But we need leadership with leadership with the experience, skills, and values to help navigate this moment and move Hennepin County closer to that promise.
Thank you. Sheri Sutit, what will the county commissioners do during your tenure to address social justice and equity and equality?
Well, for decades, I have worked as a Hennepin County attorney specializing in employment discrimination, and it pains me that we still have so much work to do. I will be the first to admit that I don't have all the answers. So when asked this question, I went to people that I know and trust for their advice. Tanya Palmer is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director at Hennepin County. She is a person of color and a friend of mine. And Chet Cooper is an Assistant Hennepin County Administrator for Disparity Reduction. He too is a person of color and someone that I have worked closely with for years. This is what they told me. To make real change, we need to set new strategic priorities in 7 areas that will have the most effect and impact, and we need to include people of color in these conversations. Education. We need to partner with schools to increase early childhood education, increase post-secondary education, and training opportunities. Health. We need to improve access to mental health services, reduce chronic disease, and increase community well-being. Housing. We need to provide more affordable housing, reduce evictions and homelessness. Justice. We need to partner with law enforcement, prosecutors, judges to make sure that existing laws are enforced fairly and equitably, and we need to partner with the legislature to enact new laws. Also, employment, transportation, and income. The goal is that the workforce reflect the diversity of the community. We need to increase hiring opportunities, improve retention rates, and increase advancement opportunities. We also need to form partnerships with local business to provide more mentorship and training opportunities. We need to provide living wages that are fair and equitable. We need to provide transportation options to ensure access to jobs. Social justice can be attained. Social justice doesn't only mean race, but it also applies to sexism, ageism, discrimination, and any discrimination based on religion and disabilities. We can do this, and we must, to create a better future for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Aho, what will the county commissioners do during your tenure to address social justice and equity and equality?
Well, throughout all of human history, humanity has struggled to deal justly with each other. This is an ongoing issue. That's not an excuse, but it's really an acknowledgement of the problem. While we've made great progress in our nation in many ways, recent events really prove that we still have much work to do. For me personally, social justice is a tenet of my everyday life and, of course, in the leadership roles I hold. While working on the city council, I have made sure that we as a city enable people of all races, all backgrounds to succeed. I grew up in Detroit and remember the '67 riots where parts of the city were destroyed and 43 people were killed. Sadly, more than 50 years later, we have witnessed that same kind of outrage explode within our own county after the George Floyd killing. It should not surprise anyone that bad actors took advantage and filled the leadership void to incite, inflame, loot, and damage people's families, homes, and businesses. We can and must do better, not only in our talk, but in our walk. First of all, I will listen and have an open door policy where every resident and opinion are not only welcomed, but encouraged. And I agree that we need to have a panel of all backgrounds of people to listen to and to form new ideas for transforming our system. Secondly, I will be your voice to ensure that our policies and procedures are equitable and fair in every segment of local county government. Third, I will be your advocate and be proactive with real solutions to address these issues, including protecting individual rights, access to services and opportunities like education, equity, and participation. Within our district, our schools are leading by example to ensure every child receives an excellent education, which is really the foundation of their future and a critical aspect of social justice. I have been meeting with our local police chiefs within the district to ensure that we have specific training to place and de-escalate and protect and serve people regardless of their race. I will promote those same policies through our county to ensure that all people are treated equally and with humanity, and that our residents know that they can call 911 for emergency services regardless of their race or location.
Thank you. Carmel Adobe, what will the county commissioners do during your tenure to address social justice and equity and equality?
Hi, thank you. I'd like to first start off by saying that we no longer have the time or the luxury of just addressing or simply looking at the issue of social inequality. Now is the time for action, and now is not the time for using our past experiences or skills to think that we know what we can do in an unprecedented time. No one has ever seen this type of uprising before, and I don't think that anyone has the key to life or the answer to how we're going to get over this. As commissioner, though, I would like to construct a plan to restore cop and community relations. Growing up on the east side of St. Paul, we had officers who would come to recreational centers, that would come to basketball games, cookouts within the rec center, and these really helped to be able to blend those communications between cops and the community. Also, I think that cultural competence training is needed so that policing can move towards a constructive manner rather than being undignified at this point. I would like to echo what Kimberly said about creating a community review board, but I would like to give them more power than just discussing the issues. Once again, I think now is the time to actually address and do something to make a change that's gonna last forever so that our kids aren't bearing the sins of our problems right now. Also, I think that we need to create a more revived government assistance program. Right now, I feel that it is being measured more by the budget being spent rather than the lives that are being changed and the people that are successfully graduating off of the MFIF and other government assistance programs. So I think we really need to take a look at how many people's lives are improving from these services, and if they aren't, we need to put the money into different places. Thank you.
Thank you. Dario Anselmo, what will the county commissioners do during your tenure to address social justice and equity and equality?
Thank you. Well, quick review of what they are doing, and really the line of business that's in place right now about the organization of disparity reductions. I'm happy to see that in place in Hennepin County. I've heard a couple of people comment about it would be great to form a committee to look a little deeper into this. The board has actually done that, and I believe next week is appointing people to the Race and Equity Advisory Council. That'll be a council made of 15 to 23 people, with some of the primary duties will be to understand the Hennepin County's vision and strategy to reduce disparities. They're going to evaluate, they're going to have participation, 10 monthly meetings with race and equity meetings, develop a plan and a report. So I'm glad to see that some of that is going, and I'm going to be a happy, excited, eager participant in that process. Other things that I think that we can do is certainly is in our criminal justice system. Too many people of color end up in that system for the wrong reasons, and we need to make sure that when they're there that they get out of it as quickly as possible. Reviewing how the process works is going to be key, and making sure that they can find ways to reduce the things that happen to juveniles, as well as placement of homes and things like that. I think one of the biggest things outside of what the county does in its reach, it gets into housing, and that's more affordable housing, and it's finding the right ways to do it. A lot of that is done outside of the county, but the county needs to be a participant. Workforce development, which is one of my priorities. I ran out of time to talk about that. but that's a key item that I worked on when I was at the Capitol, and it's something that the county plays a role in. I think needs to play a bigger role in. You know, working with groups like Summit Academy in North Minneapolis, the Pathways to Prosperities program. That's one more way that we can find a way to help people, equitable, have a better life, a better future, and that makes our world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll be having 1-minute response times. The question is, what committees or subcommittees do you think you could contribute the most to as a county commissioner, and why? And we'll start with Sheri Sutit.
Well, first to begin with, working with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, working with the county and the criminal justice system would be something that would certainly be within my current frame of expertise. Also working in the area of disparity and discrimination, because that has been my specialty for the last 30 years in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. But I would really like to focus on environment. I think it is so important of an issue. I think the county is currently doing a good job with a lot of the programs that they have, but I think there's also so much more work that could be done. That's an issue that's of particular importance to me. I think we have an obligation to our children, to our grandchildren, to provide for a better climate. And there's so many things that the county can do in that respect. Building more efficient buildings, looking into alternative energy sources, solar panels. Currently right now, the county is looking in building, did I just get the stop sign? Okay.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carmel Adobe.
Hi, thank you. Can you just repeat the question for me quickly?
Sure, and I won't be repeating it all the time, but just ask me if you'd like it repeated. What committees or subcommittees do you think you could contribute the most to as a county commissioner, and why?
Thank you. I think that I can contribute a lot to social services as well as human services, especially as it pertains to the foster care system. Being a former ward of the state myself, I do see some of the cracks in the infrastructure of the system, and I would like to advocate for those kids that are still facing the childhood adversity. Also, I think that I could be a very good advocate for people who are using childcare assistance, medical assistance, and MFIF services. I myself have needed them to provide for my 2 children. Once again, there are a lot of obstacles and challenges that are keeping people from using these services successfully. And so I would really like to voice their perspective and give a new lens to the subject so that we can fix these things and have a better future for kids to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Brad Aho.
Well, thank you. Transportation is one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I think has a big impact on many people's lives, both personally and from a business perspective. I have, during my tenure on the City Council for 16 years, I have served as chair of the I-494 Corridor Commission and Commuter Services, where we help people find different alternative ways to get to work and to use different methods of transportation. I'm also chair of Southwest Transit Bus Service, and I was their past treasurer. So I'm very familiar with transit, public transit, and how that affects our residents. And we're using some innovative things to help people navigate through, especially during these times of COVID-19, where we're doing medical transport for people to get them to their hospital and doctor appointments, and that's been very effective. I would also say that I'm very effective at housing. We've done a lot with housing and affordable housing in Eden Prairie, and I could continue to work on that, as well as workforce development and healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kimberly Wilburn.
Hi, so my primary issue that I have listed is the environment and climate change. And it's hard to pick issues because there's an intersectionality, and like I said, we need to have a racial and social equity lens at everything we look at. So working on the environment is a passion of mine because we are running out of time before there's permanent damage done to our planet. And then criminal justice. So wherever I can do the most good and work on criminal justice reform would also be where I'd like to serve.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Dario Anselmo.
Thank you. Well, there are 5 primary committees that are out there: administrative, health and human services, intergovernmental, public safety, and public works. 2 of those probably have the best fit for me. Public safety, with my experiences that I've worked with downtown, and certainly I've got to know a number of the sheriffs, and certainly when I look at the criminal justice system and how they intercede, it also ties into a little bit of my other passion of mental health and what is going on and how we need to do a better job in both of those areas. The other part, intergovernmental relations. I think I had mentioned that briefly. Certainly having served as a state representative, having bipartisan relationships at the Capitol, as well as in Washington, is important because 20% of our budget comes from those agencies. So it's really important that we do a good job there. And carrying on Jan's role, regional rail authority, making sure Southwest Light Rail gets built right and safely is important to me. So I would look to carry on that subcommittee, as well as another committee that works with the University of Minnesota and the Pathways to Partnership as a Workforce Development. So 3 subcommittees, 2 main committees. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we will hear from Chris Latondras.
Yeah, obviously with my spouse working at Hennepin Healthcare, I've learned a great deal about how that $1 billion layer of government operates. And there's actually a couple of Hennepin County commissioners that serve on the board of Hennepin Healthcare. So with the county's huge footprint in public health, mental health, and just general well-being, that would be of huge interest. So the Environment and Energy Department is actually housed inside Public Works, and climate change leadership at the county is another big issue for me. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Minnetonka Climate Initiatives and the West Metro Climate Action, and would want to continue that work on climate change on the Public Works Committee. And then intergovernmental relations. So on the Hopkins School Board, my relationships at the Capitol, including with Lieutenant Governor Flanagan and Governor Walz. I'm endorsed by Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, and relationships on a bipartisan basis across the Capitol would put me in a very strong position to advocate for our county needs. And also my experience living and working in Washington, D.C., where I continue to have relationships with agency leads in those places.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to a new question. How would you plan to address a major influx of child protection cases and needs for foster care due to COVID-19? And our first candidate is Chris Latundras.
Oh man, well this is an issue that is absolutely near and dear to my heart as a school board member, for whom, when I think about the role of government, is first and foremost to provide a basic safety net and providing for the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable are our children who are, their parent is Hennepin County and is the government in many of these cases. And listen, COVID-19 has blown a hole right through the center of Hennepin County budgets. And these are issues every single day that we are having to work on the Hopkins School Board, where you've got a budget crisis and a budget shortfall, but you're also trying to scramble and figure out how you meet the needs of all students and families, but in particular, making sure those most vulnerable young people don't fall through the cracks. So I think more than anything, it's just going to require dedicated, consistent focus on the part of Commissioner who's willing to stand up and be an advocate for these children, as I have been every single day on the Hopkins School Board.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Sheri Sutit.
Thank you. For actually about 3 years, I worked in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, the Child Protection Unit, where I represented the Department of Children's and Family Services. So I know what an important area this is. And as Chris said, I feel strongly that it's a big part of government's role is to protect people that cannot protect themselves. And first and foremost, that is children. So I think COVID has changed all of our priorities. It's turned everything upside down. We really need to look at where the biggest need is. And certainly this is a need. We need to deal with children that are in child protection and foster care, provide for their basic needs, their safety, their health, and make it a priority.
All right, thank you. We'll next hear from Dario Anselmo.
Big challenges out there in a lot of ways, and this gets down to budget and the amount of staff you can have to deal with this. I was recently talking to some friends that were going through some challenges in the western part of District 6 with trying to do an adoption, and it just seems like there's not enough staff to handle the cases that come through there. To make that better, of course, looking at programs that support families, I go back to what does Hennepin County do on the housing side? What do we do with our food programs, and what do we do with our job training scenarios? But in terms of how we actually deal with this problem, I don't have a succinct answer to it. It's budget, it's personnel, it's staff, and it's leading, it's supporting the leadership that we have there. We're actually not doing it. We're overseeing the board, providing policy details and monies and funds to go through with that. And that's my answer.
Thank you. Brad Aho.
Well, fortunately, we have about $220 million of federal money through the CARES Act that was given to Hennepin County. And there's also probably another about $100 million coming. Not all of that money has been earmarked for certain specific spending yet. I think this really highlights a very important need. I think we really need to look at our child protective system and the adoption system and the foster system. I think we really need to evaluate and see if it's effective. Is the money that we're spending on it effective? What should we do to improve it? I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but I think this money can go a long way towards helping to accommodate the need due to specifically to the COVID-19 issue that's going on right now.
Thank you. Kimberly Wilburn.
Well, I think first we need to actually look at our foster care system and evaluate what role racism is having in separating families of color. And are all these children that have been placed into foster care, do they really need to be in foster care? Beyond that, then, as others have stated, it's a budgeting issue. And so we need to, one, prioritize it as an important budget item, and then also look for funds from the state and federal funds to help with the issue.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Carmel Adobe on this topic.
Hi, thank you. As a former foster child myself, I do have a lot of experience on this subject matter. When it comes to foster families, I do agree with Kimberly that sometimes systematic racism can play a role here as well. I think we need to work on reuniting families as always the first option. Parent education so that they can successfully live independently with their children without the need for government help. Also, these children in foster care really need services for mental health as well as a childhood. A lot of times being in foster care, social workers, judges, they forget that you are a child. They are still children, though they are living with adversity and very disadvantaged. They need to be treated so. And also I think that we should do more foster parent recruiting. There really isn't enough word out about how big and great the need is for healthy, positive foster parents to impact these kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have a new question. How do you think the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department will be affected by possible changes in the Minneapolis Police Department, such as defunding or changing the Minneapolis City Charter? And we will start with Carmel Adobe.
Hi, thank you. I think that the change is going to be positive. I think that this change has been a long time needed. I was doing research last night on how far back police brutality stems, and I found the story on the 1964 Freedom Murders. That was actually a Mississippi sheriff who abducted and helped kill the government workers of CORE. So we really do have to realize that this is a systematic problem. It isn't going to be fixed overnight, and it definitely can't be bandaged or just wrapped up for a quick response. We have to take time and we have to implement changes. We can no longer address or talk about the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to read the question again. How do you think the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department will be affected by possible changes in the Minneapolis Police Department, such as defunding or changing the Minneapolis City Charter? And next is Kimberly Wilburn.
So the sheriff released a statement talking about what changes have, what policies are already in effect for the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office and what changes they are looking at. I don't, there's a lot of confusion about what defunding means, and I can't get into that in 1 minute. But the things that that he's listed, if you have systemic racism in place, studies have shown that it won't make a difference. Implicit bias training, for example, doesn't work if you're dealing with a systemic racist system. So I think it remains to be seen. We need to evaluate the Sheriff's Department on its own, and we need to have data and transparency so that we can evaluate.
Thank you. Next, Chris Latondras.
Yeah, so I want to just start by saying how proud I am of Sheriff Hutch and just how he has embodied that role and in many ways reimagined the role of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department and even what the role of officers could be. He's trying to make incremental steps, at least, towards not criminalizing things that shouldn't be criminalized, like his program, if somebody's got a broken light out, to not give them a ticket, but give them a voucher to help repair their tail light. And I really think this comes down to reimagining those roles, breaking down silos. But public safety is one of our biggest book of businesses in Hennepin County, but so is human services. And when you think about, our sort of one size fits all approach to law enforcement, where, an armed officer with a badge and a gun is not the right answer for many or even most situations. So when I think about our 911 dispatch centers in Hennepin County, I know there have been some efforts, for example, to embed mental health professionals in those 911 dispatch centers, but I think we need to move one step further than that. I think we need to give Hutch the funding he needs to dispatch social workers and mental health professionals into the field for some of these calls.
Thank you. Next is Sheri Sutit.
Thank you. I think that the Hennepin County Board does not oversee local city police departments. They do, however, oversee the Sheriff's Department. And I think the question is, if there is defunding of police, how will that affect the sheriff? And I do want to first state that I am very much against defunding of the police department. I think public safety is the #1 issue of government responsibility. And I think that we need to support, especially the Sheriff's Department. It's a really tough job that they do. And I think that the workers need our support. But we all make sure that justice is rendered fairly and equitably. And Sheriff Hutchinson has been doing a really excellent job trying to maintain a workforce that is diverse and that respects the community. I think we need more people of color in the Sheriff's Department. I certainly think we could use more women in this department, and training through racism and sexual harassment.
Thank you. Next, Dario Anselmo.
Well, a lot of potential challenges for Hennepin County if Minneapolis goes on some of the pathways that they are. And I would recommend that they look at the working group that was put together by Attorney General Keith Ellison and Public Safety Director John Harrington, because that plan was in place in February. And if they could have done more of that, maybe we would have prevented something that was so tragic before. The budget for Hennepin County Sheriff is $118 million. And we may need more money if we're having to do more things. Hopefully we'll get it from Minneapolis. I think the sheriff's deputies do a great job with the resources that they have. Embedding more mental health workers has been something I've been an advocate for a long time. Having toured the 911 call center, I've seen how they do and what they've got to do, and it's a lot of work, but I think that will be helpful. But reacting to Minneapolis is tough. I remind people before COVID just hit, I had 3 shootings within 100 feet of my business, one of them going into a business. So, you know, crime is not going to go away, and the rampage in Minneapolis is not either. So we've got to deal with both, and having a well-run police department is important in Minneapolis, and Hennepin County can't do all of it. So I just hope that we don't get caught in their overreaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we'll hear from Brad Aho.
Well, I do think this talk about reforming police is timely, and I do think we need to look at our policing policies. I think it's a little bit overreaction to look at defunding and dismantling our police. I've been speaking with our past Sheriff Rich Stanek, Hennepin County Sheriff, and as well as police chiefs in our cities in District 6, and to get their perspective. And you know, if Minneapolis chooses to radically change their policing and reduce it, that's going to put a lot more burden on the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. The sheriff has 45 cities in Hennepin County to work with. Many of them have police departments, but many of them don't. And those cities really rely heavily on the sheriff's office. I know in Eden Prairie, we have our own 911 dispatch center. We have our own police force. I've worked exclusively with them on policing and policies, but we still rely on the county to do services for heavy duty crimes like murder and different felonies. So we all rely on them, and I know there's going to be heightened scrutiny on not only the local police, but as the county as well. So we need to help them out.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is one thing you will personally do to fight discrimination and racism? And we will start with Dario Anselmo.
Well, you know, I did, you know, by going down to actually the Hennepin County Government Center for the protest to show the solidarity and be there to see what was going on and to understand it. And I so often see the other side of needing more police as opposed to what happens to people of color who have bad experiences. I invited 2 friends over that were African-American, you know, a couple days after that, and had a very good yet uncomfortable conversation. And, you know, people like me need to keep doing that. And we need to find ways to make sure people are safe and respected. And that's what I did, and that's what I'll continue to do. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, Brad Aho.
Thank you. I think we need to all be aware of the situations. We need to really find solutions. I think it's time to not just talk about solutions and talk about the issue. I think we need to work to find solutions. And being an engineer, that's really what I'm all about, is working with people of disparate groups, getting them together, and defining the issues and finding solutions. And I think that's really what we need to do. It's time to stop talking about it and having conversations, but actually having action. Time is now to have action to fight against these different discriminations and racism in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kimberly Wilburn.
Well, I intend to call out racism when I see it. And I just have to say that, and this is not a push for or against defunding, but if you don't understand why after continual murder of our people, why people are calling for defunding, I think that's a problem.
Thank you. Next, Carmel Adobe.
Hi, thank you. I would like to start by saying that I fully stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matters movement and others who are helping to end this public safety emergency that we call racism. As far as fighting discrimination in our community, I personally have always been a trailblazer and a groundbreaker when it comes to doing things that have never been done by African American women or women of my age or women who are former wards of the state. So by going into these different avenues and continuing to open the box for people, I'm spreading hope, and I think that I can help fight discrimination by showing people that we're no different from each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Latondras.
Yeah, just because I'm towards the end, could I have you repeat the question? I want to make sure I get it exactly.
Certainly. What is one thing you will personally do to fight discrimination and racism?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I really do think this does come down to words versus action and public track record in public leadership of doing this kind of work and getting things done. On the Hopkins School Board, I am the vice chair of the Hopkins School Board. That means that I sit as the chair of our Policy and Monitoring Committee, which is similar to what we do on the Hennepin County Board. And in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, and it was a murder, let's just be explicit about that, we passed a resolution at the school board on systemic racism and the murder of George Floyd. And one of the, therefore be it resolved, was that we will take a look at every single policy in Hopkins Public Schools, evaluate it through the lens of that statement. I encourage people to go read it and align those policies to the statement. That's work that we had started on things like school-based disparities, on things like gender discrimination. And that's the work that will continue. And I take it very, very seriously as the chair of the Policy and Monitoring Committee. We will get that done. We will make those changes. We'll be looking at our relationships with our SROs, our school resource officers as well. Words versus action. I've gotten it done.
Thank you. Finally, we'll hear from Sheri Sutit.
Well, thank you. So the question is, what have I done personally to address and fight discrimination and racism? For the last 20 years, I have specialized in Title VII employment discrimination that prevents discrimination of race and other protected interests in the workplace. So I have personally dedicated my career to this issue. What I have also done very recently is participated in peaceful demonstrations as far as recent as last week. I donated money and supplies to South Minneapolis after I agree with the murder of George Floyd, and I agree with it being a murder, and felt that my money and help in that way could help that community that was so much in need. I also reached out to my friends, especially my coworkers, people of color, and asked them how they were doing. And I just got such warm feedback to know that that even the white community was concerned about our friends. And I was devastated by this, and I'm sure that my friends were as well. And then I decided to run for public office to effectuate real change. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is, in their budget decisions, commissioners decide the funding for programs and projects in transportation, human services, public safety, public health, and energy and environment. What are your budget area priorities? And we will start with Brad Aho.
Well, my budget priorities really have to align with what are the needs. And I think it's really important to go back and assess what the needs are and where those needs lie. Look at past budgets and see if those budgets are for those different areas are meeting the needs, and then evaluate, should those budgets go up or down? Should the processes that are being followed to implement those budgets be changed? I know in Eden Prairie we've got a very robust budget process where we go through almost a year-long process to set the budget, and I know Hennepin County does the same thing. And working through that process really allows you to visualize where the needs are. I think we have big needs in obviously healthcare. We have big needs in transportation issues. In meeting the needs of our most vulnerable, we have large needs, and so I don't have all the answers for that right now. I would have to go through that budget process with staff to determine that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Dario Anselmo.
There's a lot in this budget, 119 pages. I've gone through a couple of years of it and having worked again on an education budget of $12 billion, which was unbelievably complicated in education. I can tell you it's a lot. You know, I'm for spending more money on mental health services. I think it's such an important thing. It's such a critical crisis for us. I want us to look at what we do with our public safety. Are there better ways to spend those dollars? And I think that we may end up having to spend more in that space. At the same time, you know, taxes are something I hear about from so many people, as I mentioned earlier. So we've got to watch that side. I'd love to bring in a McKinsey group or even Andrew Dayton's Constellation Fund that uses a data-driven performance criteria to really look at what the benefits are of programs. And I think that sort of innovative approach will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Chris Latondras.
Yeah, so I'm one of the 2 board members on the Hopkins School Board that sits on our budget committee. And right now, Hopkins, the local government, is facing what all local governments are facing, from school boards to city councils to Hennepin County government, which is COVID-19 has taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of our budgets. So right now, like, local governments are in emergency mode. We are plugging holes. We are then trying to like make the ship seaworthy and then figure out how to make it sail. And I mean, so the first priority is figuring out how we shore up Hennepin County budget in the midst of a global pandemic with declining revenues. And I'll tell you how it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen by making promises to our community on the one hand about increased investments in X, Y, or Z area, while at the same time running digital ads talking about how you're going to cut taxes. If you're going to cut taxes on the Hennepin County Board, you should be transparent about it on this forum, and then be honest with voters about exactly what programs you intend to cut to pay for those other investments. But we're in emergency mode here with budgets, and it's going to be a really tough few years, and we've got to be honest with taxpayers about that.
Thank you. Next, Carmel Adobe.
Hi, thank you. I think that one of the big things that we should work on during this budget as far as transportation is the fact that 40% of people using Metro Transit for transportation are mostly people of color. When this happens, they are seeing 30 minutes plus commuting time. So I think that the MPIF system should create a program that helps parents to get a driver's license so that they can ultimately be independent. Also, when it comes to healthcare, I think that we need to do more in the inner city to educate parents on healthy cooking, as well as healthy shopping education. And there has also been a lot of challenges with medical assistance. Some of the dentist office, doctor's office in suburban cities will not take medical assistance, or will only accept a certain amount of people, which disqualifies a lot of people who need the services and aren't able to find transportation to other places. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sheri Sutit.
Well, currently the biggest allocation of the budget goes to human services, and I support that we continue that. It's our obligation, especially during COVID time, to provide for population that can't provide for themselves. So that would be number one. But I also think that the county board is obligated to do what they can to help get the economy back on track, because without that, our social structure is just going to it can't get back on track again. So I think continuing to provide assistance to small business owners in our community. And I think we really need to look at childcare assistance, because right now there's a huge percentage of the population that are working from home, and people are not going to be able to get back to work again unless they have some childcare assistance. And there's room in the budget for that. I think we need to make that as a priority. And then also healthcare. I think healthcare is such an important issue. I would particularly like to see the Department of Public Health right now start looking ahead to the future and looking at when there is a vaccine for COVID, that it is distributed equitably and fairly, and probably for free, so that the population can be vaccinated as quick as possible when the time comes, and will also help the economy to move forward at that point then.
Thank you. And finally, Kimberly Wilburn.
Hi, so I agree with the others that the next few budget sessions are going to be very difficult as a result of COVID and decreased revenues. I believe Health and Human Services was already underfunded. But I agree that we're just going to have to sit down and look at the budget and look at what we have and look at where the greatest needs are and do our best to meet those areas where the greatest needs are. And again, look at it through an equity lens so that we aren't leaving out the most vulnerable when we're trying to help people.
Thank you. We have a new question now. Chris Latundras will be the first one to respond. How will the county fund more affordable housing and homeless shelters? Chris?
So again, an issue very near and dear to my heart as a school board member, where we know that the single greatest predictor of academic disparities start long before students walk through the doors of our classroom. And it starts with access to stable and affordable housing. Same with public health impacts. And we've been talking throughout this evening about racial disparities in housing, public health. So you can't fix that without addressing and stabilizing the housing situation here in the Twin Cities. I've not just advocated for that, but taken action as a Hopkins school board member. We have brought a national program through some of my relationships in the Obama administration on ending or reducing youth homelessness in Hopkins public schools by 50% in the next 5 years. And that's a program that we're looking at in Hennepin County and statewide as a model for early intervention and programming and funding families at scale. I'd also like to sit on the Hennepin County board on the Hennepin County Housing and Redevelopment Authority in order to play a hands-on role in increasing the scale of those investments in affordable housing.
Thank you. Next, Carmel Adobe.
Hi, thank you. A lot of money has been spent on affordable housing, but not much thought has been given to the time frame of how long people are able to use these subsidies or be in a certain affordable housing unit. I think that the board is going to have to look at how much time they're allowing people to stay in these places so that they can eventually be able to independently care for themselves. No one wants to be stuck in a position where they're stagnant and they're not independent and they are reliant on government assistance. So I think that by giving people a shorter time frame on housing assistance would benefit everyone. We'd be able to get more people into housing and more people into long-term lasting housing that they will not need assistance for. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sheri Sutit.
To address this issue in 1 minute is so overwhelming to me. But to be honest, when I first started to run for Hennepin County Commissioner, I went on a listening campaign. And I wanted to listen to people in my community about what issues were important to them. And I was really taken back how often people talked about affordable housing. And it's not something really that I knew a lot about. And I decided that I was going to try to self-educate on the issue. And what I found was generally, wages have not kept up with the price of housing, and apartment costs and subsidies have just not kept pace with that issue. We have no legislation in Minnesota about preventing increasing rent. So every month or every year, rentals go up. Wages again are stagnated. Interesting fact, January 1st, the city of Minneapolis has a new policy that all new apartment units must have affordable housing. Again, this is such an important issue to our community. I think the Carding Board recognizes that. In 2020, they approved $14 million for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. So it's something that is on the board's radar. We need so much more work to be doing on this issue. Because it affects even the western suburbs.
Thank you. Next, Brad Aho.
Well, affordable housing is something I'm very familiar with. Obviously, the Met Council puts goals on each of our cities in the area for affordable housing. And so we've used a lot of different tools in Eden Prairie to garner affordable housing. One of those is naturally occurring affordable housing, helping people to keep up their houses and keep those houses in a state where they are naturally occurring affordable. Also, we've used inclusionary housing. We've used CDBG and TIF funding to help with affordable housing. We've worked with developers to make sure that as new developments come in, the city works with that developer to ask for a certain percentage of those units to be affordable. And we've put policies in place to make sure that that happens, not only one time, but also in perpetuity. So I think we need to lead with public-private partnerships. We also have to be aware of unintended consequences. Minneapolis area has high housing costs, and part of those is because we've put too many policies and procedures in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kimberly Wilburn.
Hi, so I wanted to point out that when we say we have an affordable housing crisis, we have a need not only for subsidized housing, but for instance, my adult children live at my house because there's no affordable housing in Minnetonka that they can afford, even though they are working. So we need to look at all of those. And as to how we pay for it, we need to work with the Met Council. We need to work with funding from the state and national funding sources and non-government agencies like Habitat for Humanity and other agencies to get housing built. And I know, did I mention working with the local governments? We need to work with cities and Met Council on what's being built where, and convincing cities that maybe building the luxury apartments, even though you get that tax income, you're building units that most of your workforce can't afford to live in. So,
thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Dario Anselmo.
Thank you. Big issue. Globally, it really requires federal partners with the tax credit, the state of Minnesota with bonding to really provide those funds. The county's piece of this is about $20 million out of a $2.5 billion budget. So it is pretty small. They've typically concentrated those funds into transit-oriented development, which is something that we're responsible for, as well as getting money into the Affordable Housing Incentive Fund. So the areas that we see most of those needs for are in Minneapolis. That's not really where we're representing, but we're a part of that board. In the areas of Minneapolis, I should say of Edina and Minnetonka, we certainly have seen things like with natural occurring affordable housing, as well as community land trusts, which are other ways to increase the availability. And finally, the Met Council needs to do their part because they control that. They've wanted us to have a tighter urban suburban environment. And if they increase the ability to expand housing, that will drive the cost down. It's a complicated issue. The county plays a role in it, but it's not as big as people think. And I want to see us do better on that job.
Thank you. Now we have a new topic, and the first person to respond will be Dario Anselmo. And this is a little long, so listen carefully. Since the coronavirus pandemic arrived, Hennepin County trail usage has as much as doubled, demonstrating a continued and increased need for safe, well-maintained, and accessible pedestrian and bicycle facilities. The County Board approved 2040 bicycle transportation plan requires $1.5 million a year to complete the trail network by 2040, while current funding levels are only half that. What level of funding do you support and why? Dario?
That's a good question. Well, when people go to my website and see all the videos I'm making in all these communities, it seems like I'm running at times for Three Rivers Park Board Commissioner because I love those trails and I see the value. And Hennepin County has made some good investments like the Dakota Trail, and they've done it with other counties, and they were part of a $5.9 million project. I have to look really carefully. Again, we talk about budget, and we're in a tough budget cycle. So I really can't make a commitment to doing it. I can tell you I'm a huge fan, a huge biker, and I want to see us spend money to help these systems. Three Rivers Park District has a budget of about $60 million. So they do a pretty good job in that area. So I might lean on some of our other partners to help in that process, but I'll be there. But I want to be consistent about watching our taxes, knowing that we're going to have a deficit and how we meet those needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kimberly Wilburn.
Yeah, so I'm sort of going to echo a lot of that. I'm an avid cyclist as well, and I love our trail system. but I can't make a commitment to a level of funding without looking at the budget in more depth and seeing where needs are. Because there are going to be some needs that trump the trail system at this point, unfortunately.
Thank you. Next, Brad Aho.
Well, I too love the trails and love biking and walking, and we use them regularly. In Eden Prairie, we have over 131 miles of biking and walking trails. And I've been a strong advocate for making sure that we keep those well maintained and we add to them and have connectivity. I think connectivity is important for communities to have good connectivity between different neighborhoods and areas. And so I think we need to look at the whole system as a whole and not just one small area. I do think that it's important to work with different partners to make sure that we're getting the most out of our investment. And a lot of times we can get grants from either the state or the federal government to help with that process. And I know it's going to be tough with our current budget situation, given COVID-19, given the all of the rebuilding that's going to be needing to take place after the George Floyd incident. So I think it's going to take some careful scrutiny of the budget, but that will be a priority as well.
Thank you. Sheri Sutit.
There's a lot of bikers running Hennepin County. I am no exception to that. I'm an avid biker, and I used to know how many miles of bike trails there were in Minnetonka, and I can't remember that figure at the moment, but I'm sure that I have every single mile on several occasions. And the parks as well. I have kids, and I think it's a gift to our community, the bike trails and the parks that we have. And I would hate to see budgetary cuts in those areas. I think it's really important for outdoors, for the health, for the mental health and well-being of our community. I think it's truly what makes our western suburbs special. So in the time of COVID, my response is we have to look at things different. We have to be more creative, how we use our money, how we find funding sources. And quite frankly, it would be a priority for me to continue to maintain and keep up the parks and trails in our western suburbs.
Thank you. Next, Carmel Adobe.
Hi, thank you. I am not a bicyclist, but me and my daughters do use the trails around the city of Hopkins as well as the playgrounds. I do think that we need more funding for trails for people to be able to be living healthy, active lifestyles. But I wouldn't be willing to commit to a large amount of money without looking into the plan myself. I haven't done much research on how much money we are spending on the trails and parks, but I would like to look at making sure that the budget does get spent on people first over trails and parks. Thank you.
Finally, Chris Latondras.
Yeah, well, let me just say that I learned how to ride bikes on these trails. And as a Hopkins resident, the convergence of these trails right on the Depot coffee shop, which was a partnership with Hopkins Public Schools, is near and dear to my heart. I would have to echo what so many others have said. We have unimaginable needs in front of us on the Hennepin County Board. Trails are definitely a transportation issue. They are a health issue. They're a climate change issue. All of those issues really, really matter. And I think, but there's an adjacent set of realities as our county is trying with our transportation and transit investments to move our roads to 0 deaths and inform the public that roads aren't just for moving cars, they're for moving people. And that our roads need to be designed for their most vulnerable users. And to do that, that involves investments in transit. That also involves investments in our trails. So yeah, like others, I can't make a specific commitment to that dollar amount right now, but I just really do understand those intersections. And I have to keep my running feud with my good buddy in Portland, who always claims, Portland, Oregon, who always claims that they have the best biking system in the United States. And I have to say, not so fast. It's actually here in Hennepin County.
Thank you. Now we'll have our last question before your closing statements. And we'll be starting with Chris Latondras. Climate change is one of the biggest issues being discussed. What are your thoughts on climate change? Chris? You're muted.
Sorry, I was sorry about that. I was flipping through windows. Listen, this is one of my top priorities as your next Hennepin County Commissioner. In the absence of federal leadership on climate change, it's been left to our cities, our counties, even our school districts to lead on this issue. And I really do support the current Hennepin County goal of reducing emissions by 80% by 2050. But I don't think that that goes far enough, fast enough. And I think the one thing that we can be doing on the board to really ignite a fire under this is not just talk the talk, but like I've done my entire career, walk the walk. I'm in close conversation with those in the county right now that are working on the Hennepin County Climate Action Plan. It is a robust top to bottom across silos. Every single department in Hennepin County look at how we can reduce carbon emissions and really be a leader on this and not just a follower. And that will be something I absolutely champion from day one, is moving those recommendations forward into action.
Thank you. Sheri Sutit.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I believe that we must act now to preserve and protect our planet for future generations. Climate change is real and it needs to be taken seriously. And for those people who don't believe in climate change, I think just from an energy economy perspective, building transitioning to a clean energy economy will help build our economy faster. There's a lot of job opportunities in that area. I think that it's important that Hennepin County lead and look at different projects that are in the works, like 40,000 square foot medical examiner's office that's going to be built in Minnetonka, the expansion of North Point Medical Center, renovations that are taking place in the Thrivent building. I think they all need to be examined and to be energy efficient. I support light rail. I support transitioning to electric vehicle for all Hennepin County vehicles, promoting recycling programs, working with schools to help spread the word out that climate change is really important.
Thank you. Next, Kimberly Wilburn.
That's a broad question. We could be here all night listening to my thoughts on climate change. But I will say that I also agree that climate change is real and that we need to do more than what the current plan is calling for, and that we can look at ways to fight climate change and also build jobs. Sorry, my phone is making noise. So yeah, that's I believe climate change is real and that it's critical that we act now because we need to have a planet for our children and grandchildren and their children.
Thank you. Brad Aho.
Well, I've done a lot more than just talk about climate change and the effects. In Eden Prairie, we've been leading in not only in the state, but in the nation. We are a Green Steps city. We are working on sustainability program right now. We are one of the first cities to have a program. We called it our 2040-15 program, where we reduced the emissions and increased the mileage of our vehicles. We improved the efficiency of all of our facilities, implemented things like LED lighting and updated HVAC systems. I really feel that that God has put us on this planet. He's made us custodians of this planet. We have to do a good job in taking care of it, not only for us, but for our children and our grandchildren. I do have two with one on the way, so I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Next, Dario Anselmo.
Well, it's good to see everyone is a biker and believes climate change is real and we need to deal with it. And there's a lot of things we can personally do, like I've done, which is put solar panels on my roof of our house, and Hennepin County needs to keep doing that. And I think that climate action and climate initiatives are important. In our community in Edina, we've done a lot of that. I know Minnetonka has been working on that. The big picture really is federal and it's state. We play a small role in that. When we talk about environment at Hennepin County, we're talking about water, we're talking about waste. We don't really do a lot in this space. It's great to be supportive of it, and I am, supporting Southwest Light Rail. That's the best thing we can do, and doing more of that in transit-oriented development. We'll put less cars on the road. Those are the two biggest things we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Carmel Adobe.
Hi, I believe that climate change is another public safety emergency affecting our community. I think that now is the time to listen to Indigenous people and their calls to save and protect our earth. Also, there are people that have been unreached by this action to get people to recycle more. I think that there are people who are not getting the training on recycling. Also, I think that we could help with maybe trying some type of rent deduction for recycling or something that's going to help get recycling done in multi-housing communities. These apartments hold about 300 or more people, and sometimes none of them are recycling. And I think that that's a big problem in our community, and it's going to help us to affect climate change if we can get everyone involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to closing remarks, and each candidate has a minute. We will start with Carmel Adobe.
I would like to once again thank the League of Women Voters for this nonpartisan forum, and everyone else for joining me for my first ever political forum. With my final minute, I would like to express my deepest condolences to George Floyd's family and other families whose lives have been destroyed by police brutality and other forms of abuse of power. I'd like to talk about the expression, "I can't breathe." A lot of people have seen this lately and may be wondering what it means. Think of it as a synonym for the feeling of being suffocated and stifled by systematic racism in our country and definitely within our community. We need new ideas and new leaders. We can't keep beating the same path led by old experiences and old leaders. There is no blueprint on ending racism, so when it comes to this, we are all fish out of water. As your commissioner, I will put only one race first, and that will be the human race. Every single one of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Chris Latundras.
So I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for this and everyone who's assembled tonight. In the midst of these unbelievably challenging times, it's clear that we need good government now more than ever. And I believe that that path to a better government starts with us, just as it always has. So tonight I'm asking for more than your vote on August 11th. I'm inviting you to join us. We believe that we will win this election by loving our neighbors well through this moment of crisis. That's why in response to this pandemic, we've shifted our entire field operation into a COVID response program. Neighbors checking in on neighbors' health and welfare and ensuring folks have what they need to safely participate in the most important election of our lifetimes. You can visit www.latondras.org/volunteer to learn more. You can also learn more of my priorities just at latondras.org. And we need all hands on deck in this. By joining this campaign, you'll be joining a movement that is really by and for our community and leading us into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kimberly Wilburn.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for having this forum and for everyone who's watching. I forgot to mention that I also was endorsed by the West Metro Climate Initiative, and I invite anyone to come by my website, kimberlycaresmn.com, and we can have conversations about any topic that you'd like. And for my official statement, the decisions made by the commissioners on the Hennepin County Board touch every aspect of our lives, from health and human services to public safety to the conditions of our roads. Even though Hennepin County is the largest and most diverse county in the state, District 6 has never had a representative with my perspective on the impact of these decisions. I believe that as a county and as a district, we are ready to work together to build communities where everyone thrives, and I am excited about the opportunity to help us do better together.
Thank you. Brad Aho.
Thanks again to the League for hosting this forum. I will listen to you and your needs and work with you all to effect solutions to the real issues facing our community. As an electrical engineer, IT and cybersecurity professional, and small business owner, With your help, I will use my local government, technology, and practical business background to help lead the county to find new solutions to improve services and reduce costs. I look forward to hearing your concerns and ideas for our county. I also ask for your support and to join my campaign. Please visit ahoforcommissioner.com or on Facebook at Brad Aho Hennepin. I love this county and have a proven track record of accomplishment. I'm hardworking, fiscally responsible, and I represent your values. There is going to be a primary on August 11th, and I sincerely ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Dario Anselmo.
Thank you. And thank you again to the League, and especially to the fellow participants here for sharing your views and your experiences. And I think we all learn a lot when we do that and when we do it in a civil way. So thank you. We're dealing with some monumental changes right now and some challenges: a pandemic, a loss of trust in our public safety system, racism that's been not dealt with in the ways that we really needed to, economic disparity and unemployment of so many people. I plan to use my 30 years of business and civic and public sector experiences to help our community and help Hennepin County specifically. I will use my energy, my abilities to connect with people, as well as my passion to help others to make our community a better place to live, work, and thrive. I think back to Senator John McCain's farewell letter to our country before he died. He encouraged all Americans to break free of that tribalism trap that's out there, aim high and uniting through shared values and a love of this great nation. That's why I'm running as a nonpartisan for this office in the tradition of our current commissioner. I will put people and principles before partisan policies and politics. I will look to help government do its job where it should do its job. I will also partner with nonprofits and other organizations to provide the best value for your hard-earned tax dollars. And most importantly, I will make sure that I work in finding more ways for Hennepin County to help people by building a bridge to a better life. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Sheri Sutit.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and for those that are watching at home. For the past 12 years, District 6 residents have been fortunate to have Jan Callison as our Hennepin County Commissioner. When Jan decided not to run for re-election, I saw this as an opportunity to give back to a community that has given me so much. Like Jan, I'm a Minnetonka resident and I'm an attorney. I have a common sense approach to running government and I want to spend our tax dollars wisely. Like Jan, I have decided to run a nonpartisan campaign because this is a nonpartisan position. And I can genuinely say that I will then be working on behalf of my community, to everyone in my community. The role of Hennepin County Commissioner is complex and varied. When elected, my 30 years of Hennepin County experience will ensure that I will be prepared and ready for the job on day one. It would be an honor to serve you and your family, but first I need your vote in the primary election on August 11th. And for those who want to vote from home, you can go now to mnvotes.org, request a mail-in ballot. To learn more about my campaign, I hope you'll visit my website, sherisutit.com. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates, the League of Women Voters volunteers, and those viewing this event on cable and video for your participation in this candidate forum. This forum will be rebroadcast on LMCC and community cable channels repeatedly until the election on August 11th. You can also see Lake Minnetonka Community Cable at lmcc-tv.org for a link to the streaming video. This event was brought to you by the League of Women Voters chapters of South Tonka, Edina, Wayzata Plymouth, and Minnetonka Eden Prairie Hopkins. Links to the video will also be posted on these local league websites. Good night.